In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at the timeline window of Edius. And the timeline window in any nonlinear editing program is perhaps the most important window. This is where everything happens. This is where the edit takes place. This is where we place all of our media together, piece it together, put on our transitions and our effects, and basically do all of our editing. And so it's important to get to know your timeline window and what it is you can do with it, and how you can organize it and set it up to facilitate very efficient edit sessions. If you have been following our tutorials sequentially, you will know that we just left you as we were sorting out our media into the various folders in our asset window, or our bin window. And you remember that we had about 1,000 clips to work with yet, and we've gone ahead and done that. We've sorted all of those clips into various folders. We remembered that our girl's name was actually Vani, not Yanni, so we've made that change. And as we open up her folder now, we see we've got shots of her at home, doing her chores, cooking the meal, and working with her family, eating with her family, going to school, that type of thing. Now, even though we have about 1,000 clips, and we'll probably add more before we're finished, because I've shot in Cambodia many times over the last 10-15 years. So we'll probably grab some more media from previous shoots, and before we're said and done, we'll probably have a couple thousand clips online in our bin, and yet we'll be able to find them very quickly because we've been able to organize them into a nice file folder structure here. And as we're looking for shots to illustrate some things that Yanni might say in her interview, we'll be able to find those shots very quickly. But let's go ahead now and take a look at our timeline window. And when we speak of the timeline window in Edius, of course, we're talking about this window here. And in order to get a better look at our timeline window and what it can do, let's stretch it out. And you can do that just by taking your mouse and pointing to that area that's just right at the top of the timeline window. You'll notice that your mouse cursor kind of changes from the typical mouse pointer arrow changes to an up and down arrow. And when you see that, then you can just left click, and keeping your finger down on your mouse, you can just slide that up. And that way you can make your timeline window grow. You'll get less bin window, but when you're actually working on a edit, you want to have a lot of room available in your timeline window so that you can expand your tracks, and we'll show you how to do that. Okay, and just to facilitate this a little better, I think we'll go ahead and change this from a 1-monitor preview window to a 2-monitor, and you can do that under the View menu. Change this from single mode to dual mode. So now we have a play preview monitor and a record preview monitor. And if you're brand new to editing, the play monitor is where we sample our clips, our media, take a look at them, and determine which clips we're going to use, or which portion of clips, by setting an in and out point. And maybe we need to stretch this out just a little bit more to see our in and out points. Here we are here. So let's say we want to just grab this portion here. We can set our in point there and take it out a little bit more, set our out point. And so that's the play window. And now as we drag this down, we're just taking that section that we chose. Drop it on our timeline here as illustrating more B-roll. And yet, when we start to play the timeline, we notice that what is displayed is shown here in the record preview monitor. And so whatever we play on the timeline window is going to be showing up here in the record preview monitor. Okay, so look at your clips in the preview monitor, see them on the timeline on the record monitor. Okay, let's maybe go over here to our left-hand column here and notice some of the things that we can do here. First of all, let's notice that in the style of editing that we are demonstrating here at ediustips.com, our timeline window is divided. You can see this kind of a double bar here. Our timeline is divided into video tracks on top and audio tracks on the bottom. There is a style of editing that is available in Edius that allows you to have one track above here that gives you space for not only video but also audio on the same track. We're not demonstrating that style of editing here at ediustips.com. If you're interested in learning that, or if you're coming from another program that does that and you want to see how Edius does that, I would encourage you to search the internet and find some other resource for that. We're just dealing with the style of editing where the video tracks are separated on the top from the audio tracks that are on the bottom. And let's notice that each of our video and audio tracks can be collapsed or opened as we need to deal with the specific track. And if we need to see our tracks even a little better, we can expand that track even more. Just go ahead and right-click in this dark gray area, and you'll notice the first option is height, and right now it's only at 2. If we really want to expand that track out, we can hit high, and we'll see that we can really get a good look at the waveform of that audio track and be able to manipulate that track easier once it's expanded out. And if that's just too big for you, you can either right-click on this again and choose a different height, or you can also point your mouse to the division between the two tracks, and by pressing down your left mouse button, start dragging that down, and you'll see that you can manually collapse the track. And once you reach a point where you are happy with the width of the track, you can just let your mouse button go. And then as you need to make more room for maybe looking at your music track, you can collapse that track and just open up the music track. And then you are able to work with the music track much better. Now, just to help keep things organized, note that you can name your tracks. Just go ahead and right-click again in our area here, and notice that we can choose an option called Rename, and we do the same here. The first one is usually where I like to try and get the interview or narration. And perhaps the second audio track, we could call it ambient audio. And the fourth track, we could leave that open or maybe set it up to receive sound effects. And just because we name a track something doesn't necessarily mean that it is hardwired for that particular type of audio. And in reality, as you're working feverishly on an edit, oftentimes the music might end up down on track 4, or some ambient audio might end up actually on track 5 or 6. But at least when we start out an edit, it's nice to try and organize your tracks. And notice that we can also stretch out our video tracks. Let's just get that up and down arrow again and slide this down. And as you do open up that track, you can see that you get a much larger thumbnail of the very first frame of your video and also the very last frame of the video. Some editing programs will show you various frames along the timeline of a clip. Edius just shows the first and last poster frame. And it looks like this track isn't even open. Let's go ahead and hit the arrow here to show just how big this track can be. You'll notice there's kind of a gray area here. That is actually the mix track, and if we wanted to turn on our mix, we can do that here. And with our mix on, we can point to this little blue line here with our mouse and set a node. And once we've got several nodes here, we can manipulate the level of video on that track. So if we wanted to just do a fade up from black, we can do that with our mix track. And we'll talk more about how you can use this in a real edit situation in another tutorial once we start editing our program. But for now, just keep in mind that you are able to set your video levels on any video track and add nodes and manipulate your video that way using a mix track. Okay, and in much the same way, we can manipulate the volume and pan of audio. You'll see right now it's kind of grayed out. It's a little button here that says vol and pan, and right now when it's grayed out, you're not able to manipulate the volume or pan at all on this track. You can try pointing to the little orange arrow there and nothing happens. But if you turn that on, the first one that pops up is volume, and now you can manipulate the volume. If you just point to that orange line and click on it, you'll see that it adds a node. And if you drag your mouse down, you'll see that you're dragging the audio at the point of that node down. That may not seem that helpful, but let's just undo that. maybe we'll expand out our tracks so we're seeing what we're doing a little better. First of all, if you want to bring the audio of any given clip down all at once, just hold your Alt key down before you point to the orange line, and now when you click on it, you will be able to bring down the whole once with a sweeping motion with your mouse. And so now the volume has been brought down by minus 30 dB gain. But then there might be portions of the audio where you want to come up, and that's where you can point to your orange line and create nodes. And let's say this is a portion where we want the audio to come back up. We can grab that center node and bring it back up, but everything else stays the same. And we'll deal more with audio in another tutorial, but just so you have an idea of what you can do. And you can also, as we mentioned, manipulate the pan of the audio. Once you see pan there, you'll see that another blue line shows up. And you can manipulate the pan very much like you did the audio. Notice that you can no longer affect the orange line, but you can, by pointing to the blue line, start adding nodes there. And if you hold your Alt key down again, you can bring that whole pan down. And as you manipulate that line up and down, you will be panning your audio. And we'll talk about that again in an upcoming tutorial. All right, so volume, pan, or off altogether so that things don't get bumped by accident. Now, as you're working with your edit, there may be times when you want to just mute certain tracks so that you can work with other audio tracks and listen to them more carefully. So you can just know that you can mute any track. Say you're working on a translation of a video and you've got the English on one track, but you're trying to add the French, and you don't want the two voices overlapping that much, but you still want to have access to the English to see how you're timing things up. Well, as you're doing your edit, you can shut off the English track and just work with the French track. Okay, and what else have we got going here? If you're coming from a previous version of Edius, you're probably looking at the column here and saying, there seems to be something missing. I just not sure what oh yeah, it's the lock track. How can I lock my track? I don't see my little lock symbol anymore. Have they taken that away on us? And we click on here and we look for our drop-down menu. There's no lock mentioned. How can I lock my track? Well, I'm not sure. I'm just speculating, but I'm pretty sure that there must be someone at the design team at Edius that just loves to put in Easter egg hunts for us. And so this time in this version, he or she was able to hide our lock track. It's actually under this little new button here that is come with Edius 6, and we'll have to talk about that in a minute. But if you right-click on this button here, then you'll see that you can find your opportunity to lock a track. And what this does is that when a track is locked, you can make all sorts of adjustments to other tracks, and it won't affect the track that's locked. And we'll see as we edit that that will become very useful in certain circumstances. So, and then to unlock it, you have to right-click again and unlock it. All right, and then perhaps it is time to talk about what are these new buttons all about. Well, Edius 6 has become a lot more like Avid software. If you're coming from an Avid background, you'll probably appreciate that. Some of the others who have become very used to the way Edius has worked over the years, over the last 4 or 5 years that it's been out, are struggling with some of these new options, some of these new features, and are actually even refusing to upgrade to version 6. Because they're just not familiar with the way these work. But I believe that they'll come around, give them a few more months. Perhaps when some of the NX drivers come out, they'll be more motivated to upgrade and learn some of these new features. And when I say it's become more like Avid, we are talking about how you now have these buttons here to help you map the tracks that you want your audio or video to land on. And let's maybe just add a couple of more video tracks here. And you can add video or audio tracks very simply. Again, just by right-clicking in this gray area here, go ahead and hit Add. And if we're wanting to add video tracks, we'll select this option here, and we can choose the number of tracks. Let's add 2 tracks. And we'll notice what has happened here. Edius has inserted 2 tracks above the track that we pointed to add the tracks. If we had, let's just undo that, and if we wanted our 2 new tracks to go above the tracks that we're already working with, let's point to video track 2 and see what happens when we add it there. Add 2 tracks, and now, yes, the 2 new tracks go above the 2 that we're already working on. So just remember, you have to point to the uppermost video track that you're currently working on if you want new tracks above. But you're not limited to that. If you actually wanted to add or insert tracks below the tracks that you're working on, Edius does allow you to do that too. Just go to add vtrack to below, and let's add 3 tracks. And sure enough, we've got 3 new tracks down below the video tracks that we were working on. And you can go in and, of course, delete any track that you want. And you can do the same for audio. Just click down here in the audio. Let's say we want new tracks down below our last track. Let's add an audio track below. And now we have audio track 5. All right, so now that we've got more tracks to work with, this will become more obvious. If you've ever worked with Avid software before, you will know that they're quite exacting and demanding and restrictive in the way that they allow you to edit. And what I mean by that is, let's say we want to add a new clip of Vani cooking the meal, chopping up her onions there, and we want to place that somewhere on our timeline. Let's get our in and out points. Not only will Avid require that you set an in and out point on your play window, they'll also want you to add an in point on your timeline as well, and so we'll set an in point there. And then they'll also want you to be very specific about what track you want to send that to, and tell the program where you want that clip to land. And so you'll have to take the time to drag your video marker to the appropriate track, and also to drag your audio pointer to the track where you want the audio to land. And then as you add the clip, it will then go to the appropriate tracks. And this can be a good thing, but it can also slow you down if this is the only way that the program allows you to edit. In another tutorial, we'll show you this 3-point style or 4-point style editing, as it sometimes is called. And also, in a separate tutorial, we'll show you kind of a more free-form style of editing, a drag and drop method. And in the end, you'll probably incorporate both styles of editing and develop your own form of editing using features from both styles of it. And one of the nice things about Edius is that it is very flexible in the way that you set up your timeline window, your editing environment, and allows editors who may have come from other programs to set up an editing environment that emulates the program that they have come from, so that they can feel at home very quickly, whether it's the restrictive Avid style of editing, whether it's the free-form style of drag and drop method that maybe Premiere Pro editors have become used to, or a kind of a mixture between the two. You can set it up any way you like. And some of these new buttons or options that have come in version 6 just make it a little bit more obvious how you can set that up to emulate other programs. All right, so we come now to what these new symbols are all about in version 6. If you're coming from version 5, you may have remembered a mode called the sync mode. And the sync mode worked hand in hand for those that like to edit with the insert mode on. So let's go and change our mode to the insert mode. And now when we add our clip from our play window, either by dragging it or using the insert symbol here, let's move our timeline cursor to the beginning of our track and make sure that we're selecting track 1, and maybe for audio we'll go to 4. Let's insert this little piece of video here and notice what happens to all of our tracks. As we place this new bit of material on our timeline, everything else was pushed down. Now that's all fine and good, but what if you wanted to have your music tracks stay in place? Let's undo that, and notice track 3 is our music track. And as we now insert shots, we don't really want our music track to be pushed down. We may want to have everything else pushed down, but not our music track. Now, with the ability in version 6 of setting our sync mode to any given video or audio track, or by pressing on it once turning the sync off for any given track. Now, when we add our video clip to our timeline, we will push everything else down except for our music track. And so you can see how that would be helpful to have control over individual tracks for the sync mode. So those little symbols, that's what that's all about, is it individually controls separate tracks for sync on or off when you're working in the insert mode. Now you may have noticed throughout our tutorials that I'm able to collapse my timeline very quickly and open it up, zoom right in on a specific portion of the video to be able to work more closely with individual clips, do my trimming, add dissolves, expand out the dissolves, or very quickly be able to go back out and see the big picture. Well, I am doing that with keyboard shortcuts because I've set that up using the settings and user settings. But you are able to, even if you don't have your keyboard shortcuts defined for that, you are able to collapse your timeline or expand it with this little slider button here. So if you need to see more of your timeline at once, go ahead and slide it to the right. If you want to get right in on a piece of video and work more specifically and work in more detail, just slide it to the left. Okay, and up here you may have noticed that the insert overwrite button has been moved. It used to be up here on our timeline up here. It's now at the very top of our side panel. We can set our ripple mode here. And we also have buttons for grouping, linking, and also the snap to event symbol is now here at the top of our panel. All right, let's just maybe take a look at a few more things. You may have noticed that we have more than one sequence going here. We have one called Vani, one called Health. We don't have any material in it yet, but we've set up some sequences here. And if you want to add a new sequence to your project, you can do it from the drop-down menu under File, New, and Sequence, or use the keyboard shortcut if you want to learn those, Shift-Control-N, but you also have a symbol up here at the top of your timeline which allows you to create a new sequence very easily. And if you want to give that sequence a name, just right-click on the tab and choose Sequence Settings, and we'll call it Cambodia. And maybe we can take a look at some of these other symbols. There's a lot of redundancy to these symbols. The same operations can be found under the menu options, but sometimes it's easier if you're working on an edit just to slip up here, open a new project, import an old project into a new project, import a batch decision list. You can go after some of the recent programs that you've worked on very easily here. You can do a quick save. Of course, you can always use the keyboard shortcut for that as well. The common Control-S does a save, but you can use the icon, and you'll notice that beside many of these icons there's a little down arrow, and if you click on that you'll get a drop-down menu that gives you more options. So you could do a save as, consolidate project, and we'll do a tutorial on that at the end. Export edit decision list. You can also change your project settings here, your sequence settings, and that is the same as just right-clicking on any tab of a sequence. You get the same thing there. All right, let's keep moving down. Again, some of your common cut, copy and paste operations that are available here on the top of the timeline as well. Your title tool, you can do voiceover, you can render in and out, toggle the bin window display on and off, and you can bring up an audio mixer. Let's maybe go back to our track. Notice that as we play our timeline, you'll get a visual representation of the audio from all of the tracks. And if you're not seeing all of your audio tracks, for example, we have 5 tracks defined here, but we're only seeing 3, then it's just a simple matter of sliding that window open a little bit more to reveal all 5 of your tracks. Okay, waveform vector scope for those that know how to use those. And the last one gives you an opportunity to display or turn off your palettes. All right, but you're not restricted to the symbols that Edius provides you by default. If you want to delete some of these icons and add others, Edius allows you to do that under Settings. Let's go to User Settings and go down to User Interface and choose Button. And here, if we want to change the buttons on the top of the timeline window, let's scroll down to look for timeline. And now Edius will display all of the various types of icon buttons that are available to place on the top of the timeline. Just as an example, there's one that I like to have on the timeline that Edius does not put there by default, and that is create a still image. So let's click on that and bring it over to our list of current buttons, and hit apply and hit OK, and we'll notice that now Edius has placed this new option here at the top of our timeline that allows us to create a still image. And how to do that is you just place your timeline anywhere you would like to create a still image. Here's a nice smile of Vani, and so we hit the camera button, and Edius creates a still image and places it at the bottom of the open bin window. And so now we have a nice still shot of Vani. Well, I think that about does it for what I wanted to show you about the timeline window. It's quite flexible, and we may even pick up a few more pointers along the way as we continue our tutorials. But for now, that's it for the timeline window in Edius 6.